In the rare case that a box office hit has a person of color as a main character, often the plot revolves around race. For examples, look at the incredible works of Spike Lee and Jordan Peele. They use their platform to mix art and politics, bring attention to racism, and expose the flaws in our society. While works like these are to be celebrated, and I hope continue, I would like to challenge some aspects of race-centered cinema. When people of color are shown in negative or stereotypical light on screen, it contributes to internalized racism. Less obviously, when characters of color have plots revolving around their skin, whether positive or negative representations, it communicates that there are different requirements for people who are not white to have the spotlight. If the main representation of minorities on the silver screen targets social justice, it may actually perpetuate internalized segregation. Let me explain. Laura Mulvey talks about the male gaze, a term that describes how women are portrayed in film through a male perspective, which is often demeaning and objectifying. The male, and therefore the audience, is the looker, while the woman is the bearer of the look. Charles Ramirez-Berg places this idea in the context of race. He introduces the Anglo gaze, which is when minorities are portrayed through the perspective of Anglo-Saxon or white people. The white people are the lookers, so they hold the power, while minorities are the looked upon and powerless. Bell Hooks expands further, saying that because black women didn't see themselves in cinema, they developed an oppositional gaze. This means they didn't identify with the looker or the bearer of the look, so they were able to critically analyze issues in cinema. This idea, while centered around a specific demographic, highlights the clarity that could be gained if there were no looker and no bearer of the look. In other words, no us and no them. With a background of male, Anglo, and oppositional gaze, we can rationalize that it's important to have main characters of color whose plot do not revolve around their skin. Like the oppositional gaze exemplified, we are aiming to eliminate us versus them in more media. To examine this, I'm going to put box office hits through a test similar to the Bechdel-Wallace test that critiques equal opportunities for people of color. The criteria will be: 1. Is the main character a person of color? 2. Does the plot revolve around their skin? And 3. Are the characters portrayed with stereotypes? The first film I would like to look at is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, 2018. The main character is Miles Morales, who is half African American, half Puerto Rican. The plot has no bearing on his skin whatsoever. If you were to replace Miles with a white character, say any of the other Spider-Mans, his plot would still make sense. There are no typical stereotypes used to portray this character. In fact, this film makes an effort to break down some stereotypes by having Miles' dad be a black cop. Not only do they have a person of color as a main character, they have a person of mixed ethnicities be a superhero. Unlike Black Panther that celebrated and focused on racial differences, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse casually allowed a person of color to be a superhero with no mention of race. Because of these reasons, it passes the Equal Opportunities Test 3-3. Let's look at Princess and the Frog 2019. The main character, Tiana, is Disney's first African American princess, which made big headlines. The second main character, Prince Naveen, is ethnically ambiguous, but he does have darker skin. This film is obviously problematic because both main characters of color spend 90% of their screen time as frogs, but when they are shown in their human, dark-skinned forms, Tiana's plot revolves around the discrimination she faces trying to buy a restaurant. Tiana is a determined girl who has to work twice as hard as anyone else. While these are positive attributes, this is a common stereotype, especially for women of color, to be expected to put up with more and work harder with better attitudes. I would rate this a 1.5 out of 3 for those reasons. White main characters do not need to justify their space and time on screen, so by having separate requirements for characters of color perpetuates a sense of othering and becomes a niche product for those already interested in social justice instead of aiming to reach all audiences. In conclusion, I would like to make clear the increase in films and television shows that blatantly challenge and dismantle racism are incredibly important. In order to progress as a society, we need media that exposes our flaws. I am suggesting that when people of color thrive on screen without calling attention to their skin, it acts as an example of the society we aim to live in that has equal opportunities for all, a version of reality where people of color no longer have to fight for their space, which, after all, is our end goal.